Hello, everyone, and hello, Marie. It's a real honor to have you today as part of this interview for the Grand Multi-Literacy event. So it's an event that aims to bring information and resources to multilingual families. And so when I thought about resources, I thought straight away about you because you write books, but you do a lot of things as well on the side for families. So I'm very happy to have you. And for those of you who don't know you, I'm going to attempt a short introduction to summarize a bit what you do. But you're Puerto Rican and you are an award-winning author. You're an advocate for raising multiliterate or multilingual and multicultural children. You're the author of two books for adults that have been written in English and translated into Spanish as well. You have a bilingual book for children that we're going to talk about today, and a bilingual parenting expert, and you're host of a weekly podcast called Mamás and you give a wealth of information and encouragement on social media about how to raise multilingual and multicultural children. I hope I haven't. Oh yeah, you're also a mom of two children who are now adults, I think. Um, who you raised bilingual and multicultural. I think that's all I know. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you did really well. Thank you so much. And my author name and the name that you see out there in most of my socials is my full name, Maritere Rodriguez Bellas, and but my friends call me Mari. And anyway, I just when I started writing my books, I decided to honor my parents' last name, which was my maiden name, and I added that to for a long while after I got married, it was Mari Rodriguez Bellas, and then I took all that and it was just easier to say Maritere Bellas. But for my books and all my writing, I have my full name. So
Okay.
excited to be here with you and your audience.
Thank you very much for being here. And so I wanted to ask you, so you're, as I said, very prolific. You do loads of things for multilingual families. How did this all start? Why did you decide to do so much?
So when I was raising my children over 2 decades ago, there were no resources available, or very little, at least in the United States at the time. My husband saw my struggle and suggested I became a resource in search of information that I could share with immigrant parents raising children with two languages, which was our case, and two or more cultures, which was also our case. My husband is Greek American. I'm from Puerto Rico, but we're all Americans. So we wanted the three cultures to be part of our children's lives. My journey started with the Spanish language newspaper in LA, in Los Angeles. That's where I've lived for the last almost 4 decades now. And the column was published, it was a parenting column, and it was published by La Opinión newspaper, at the time the largest Spanish language newspaper in the country. And they published that column for 12 years. In those days, there was no internet, no Google, no email. So I became the Google of their time. And parents would call the editors when they wanted me to write about specific topics related to language and culture. And I would draw from my own experience of what was going on in my house. I would also speak with language experts that I could call on the phone or met with them in person, because there was no emails. And then I would talk to teachers, speech language pathologists, linguists, and other parents, so I could share their perspectives on what was going on. So it was part of my journalism background. I treated it like an article, if you will. Always, whichever topic related to language and culture, I would always have a quote from an expert, and
Okay, yeah.
that helped the parents understand what was happening. And oftentimes, like I say, they would call the editor and they would want a clarification on something. So I would write something up the following week, or would write a different topic that they would request.
Okay. Wow, wow. I see. And so you put a lot of emphasis on multicultural, how to raise children with different cultures and not to forget the culture of the country they are in. Can you elaborate about this? So why is it important to also honor the culture of the country they live in?
Well, it's important to, first of all, I've always been an advocate of preserving the language and preserving the culture. I think that language is the magnificent tool to instill the love of culture. And why is important is we can't know where we're going unless we know where we came from. And I think that part of that identity, that cultural identity, comes from knowing about our heritage and what came before, the people that came before us and how it all started, and the anecdotes from our grandparents, and reading about biographies from the people that made our little country a better place, that contributed to making our country. A lot of them were Latino, Hispanics. So it was important for me that our children would learn about this, and my people and my husband's Greek culture as well. And we didn't. Luckily, in Los Angeles, it's very multicultural, so we were able to find places here and there that would promote the Greek culture. So we would expose them to festivals, Greek festivals and all that. And of course, it's, there's a very large Latino Hispanic population as well. So there was from different countries. So it was Mexico and it was Central America. And then, we became friends with a group of people that, like us, didn't have any family around, but they were from Peru, Argentina, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and we all became good friends. And those cultures were also introduced in my children's lives. The food, the music, the speaking, they could tell the different accents from where they were from. So it's our cultures are such rich. There's this richness in learning about other people. And I think we also wanted our children to understand that the world did not revolve around them only. The world revolved, there's all these other people that, they become part of this bigger picture. And it was important for us to expose them to all of that, and and make them feel like they belong to all, their own culture plus all the other cultures that were around them. Because as when children start school, there's going to be kids there from different cultures and different customs and different traditions, and how wonderful that our children would learn about all of that and share their own heritage with these children.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And so you said that your husband is Greek American. Did he pass on the Greek language to your children?
No, we kind of made the decision because at the time it was really hard for us to keep up with the two languages, because I was the only Spanish language input at home, and he and I could speak English. So we spoke English to each other, and he spoke English to the children. He actually grew up with Greek as well. So he grew up with Greek and English. And at home, he would speak a lot of Greek growing up with his grandparents, and the mom and dad would speak in Greek to each other because they were both 100% Greek in both sides.
Yeah.
So when he left the house at 18, started working, he lost some of it. So when fast forward, 10, 20, 15 years later, we had children, it was really hard to juggle it all in and try to add that extra. So there's words here and there that he taught the children, but it wasn't like a structure. Perhaps if I could do it all over again, I would have been more, would have tried to find a way. But even with Spanish, it was really like I would have loved my children to go to a dual immersion school. But they were really far from, if you have ever been to LA, distances here are pretty far. So, my husband is saying to me, you're going to be in the car the whole day, taking them, waiting, and then going back to pick them up. So it was complicated. And we made the choice of doing the best we could with what we had. And that's what happened.
I think that's an important thing for us parents to remember is that we could do loads of things, but we need to keep in mind what's possible for us as well, for our sanity, and in terms of time as well. So, because for example, for me, I grew up with French and Japanese, but I'm passing on just French, not Japanese, to my children, um, because of the time. I see as already how much time I need to be able to pass on properly French. Like if I had to pass on Japanese, the time would be divided in two. So yeah, I know it's possible, but I don't regret not passing it on. I'm passing on more the culture. Like you say, it's important for children to know where they come from. So yeah, I focus more on the culture for Japanese.
I
And
agree.
so before we talk about your books, uh, because you have children who are grown-ups already, I wanted to go back quickly on your experience with them or their experience of growing up with multiple languages and cultures. Uh, just maybe as an encouragement or as a window into the future for the parents who are watching. Uh, but first, what's your maybe greatest joy once you look back at all these years as a parent now? So what's your biggest joy of having raised your children with bilingual and multicultural?
Well, my kids are now in their early 30s. So they're not perfect bilinguals, and they communicate in their dominant language, which is English. But I know in my heart that they are bilingual, and if they were dropped in any Spanish language country, they would be just fine. I do remember now how at 3 years old, my son would look at me and speak to me in Spanish and then would turn around and talk to his dad in English. And to me, that was fascinating because I learned English. I grew up with Spanish at home and I learned English at school. And I learned English when I was already 6 or 7, and he was 3. So that really was amazing to me. Today, there's so much education out there, so much research that backs up the benefits and advantages of being bilingual and multilingual. So many resources like you and Ute and Adam Beck and many others that are out there, that it would be a shame not to choose this path. And we just need to see what works for us. Every family is different. I've always said that. And then just go, do the best that you can.
Yeah, thank you. And so on the other side, there are challenges as well. Uh, what was maybe the biggest challenge you faced as a parent, and how did you overcome this challenge, or maybe not, but what was the biggest challenge you had?
Well, I think my biggest challenge was that my husband did not speak Spanish. And it was hard for us. We didn't have the resources, like I said. I think that if we had maybe a program that he could, use at nighttime, but, he was working hard, he was starting a new company. It was just, really hard to try to keep it all, and I think that we probably would make different adjustments had this happened today, and would have made it work. But because I see it's a lot of monolingual, or maybe the mom speaks Spanish fluently, and the husband or the wife learned it in school, and they kind of go back to it, and they make the intentional decision of speaking the little, even if it's a little bit, the dad or the mom speak it as well, and that is wonderful. But I didn't have that opportunity, and it was exhausting and it was frustrating, maybe because I didn't have the support. So I think that if I would go back, I would have loved to have that support, and then I wouldn't have not felt so alone, because I think that's also where the mental load of raising multilingual, bilingual kids comes from, is you feeling like you're the only one, and it could be exhausting.
Yeah. I think maybe nowadays, the fact that it's so easy to communicate with people around the world. Like you're in the United States, I'm in the UK, and we can still talk like that. I think it's really, like, for me at least, as a parent raising multilingual children, it helps me feel like I'm not alone, and to see that there are other people on the same journey. It's like you say, it relieves some mental loads from all the pressure and everything we have to do. And so this leads me to my third question I wanted to ask you is, uh, so now there are loads of tools that exist. What are some of the maybe tools you would say to all the parents? Make sure you use this tool to make sure you can raise your children multilingual.
Well, through my research and experience, I have learned that developing a family's language plan is key. I didn't know about that when I was raising my kids. My husband and I used our instincts, so it wasn't until I started researching and talking to people that I said, oh, so if we had a family language plan, this would help. And I learned that along the way. And especially when I was writing my ebook, Raising Bilingual Children, at the time, there was one common method, one parent, one language, or OPOL, which is the one that most experts talked about it for a long time. But now today there are a few others. This family language plan should include the method and the strategies to help guide your family daily language efforts for learning and for practice. It's like a roadmap. And this plan should also include everyone in your child's circle, your village, for support, not only support for your children, but support for yourself, like you and I were talking. And it is a plan that fits your family's needs and circumstances. Is not the same for Yoshito's family as for Mari's family. His plan is very different than mine. So all of you out there, you come up with this plan according to your family's needs and circumstances. And it doesn't look, it would be easier if we could just read a book that says, oh, everybody does it the same way. Well, it doesn't happen that way. It also should be evaluated or reevaluated at least once a year. I always remind parents around the summer months here in the United States, like June or July, it's time to review your family language plans, because children's needs and interests change. And we should keep that in mind when we are trying to practice and to, learn a new language.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's really important to keep in mind that what works for someone doesn't necessarily work for us. And being aware that there are loads of ways to raise a child multilingual is important. So yeah, thank you very much for this point. And so now I would like to talk more about your books. So as I said before, you wrote books for adults and books for children. Most authors choose one or the other. Why did you choose to do both?
Well, at first, the need was for parents. There was no information and resources for parents, very little tools. So I felt like that was what the need was, and I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be able to help parents with the little information that I could gather. And that's where it was right around the time of 2012, 2013, where a lot of studies were being revealed about the benefits and advantages of raising bilingual children. And so all these studies were being, articles were appearing in the newspapers. And so this publisher, Simon & Schuster, which is a pretty popular publisher here in the United States, I approached them about writing a book about culture. And they came back and said, can you write one about language? And that's where raising bilingual children came up. And then for children, later on, a few years after that, I realized that there was a lack of diverse books that children could identify with, books with protagonists that look like my kids or maybe your kids, with themes that promoted culture. So, that's when I wrote my first children's book in 2018. And then my second one was in 2020. And now I have another book coming out next year in 2024. And I think I'm hooked. I have like 3 bilingual children's manuscripts I'm working on. I'm in the hunt to find a literary agent. And I think that's the next chapter of my career is writing bilingual children's books.
Okay. And so well, I'd like to talk about one of your books, bilingual books for children, which is I Have a Secret, Tengo un Secreto. It's the story of a boy who doesn't want people to know that he's Puerto Rican and that he can speak Spanish, understand Spanish. He even pretends at home that he doesn't understand Spanish. I think it's quite it's not rare to see children like this. I was wondering if it's something that maybe happened to your children, or where did the idea come from?
Well, Junito is a character of my book. He's bilingual, English, Spanish. At home, he speaks Spanish, but when he starts school, all the kids speak the majority language, which is English. At parents' presentations and workshops, this topic would come up all the time. They would ask me, what do I do? They start school and they don't want to speak English. They don't want to speak Spanish anymore. So that's why the idea came from. That's why I wrote the book that could teach children to be proud of being bilingual and proud of their, have language pride and language, pride for their heritage.
And I like the fact that what happens in the story is that so he's hiding the fact that he knows this language. Later on, he learns that someone else actually spoke also Spanish. So yeah, like you said, all the children they go to the school and they understand they need to speak English or the language of the country, and they might not know that their other friends speak other languages. So it's a good thing as well that you include in that story. And what did I want to ask about this book as well? Yeah. So in this book, it's the solution comes from the teacher, and he feels more okay thanks to the teacher. But as parents, what would you advise parents to do at home or outside the home to help their children feel more comfortable and not ashamed of their cultures and languages?
I think the most important thing is our attitude, and that we start early on. I mean, being proud of our heritage and our languages should be something the kids know from birth. Like, as they are growing up in this daily environment where Spanish is spoken and English is spoken, or Japanese or French or whatever the languages are. And it's normal. I call it #bilingual niños or multilingual niños, only because it should be just like they have to brush their teeth 3 times a day. It should be something that normal and that routine and that natural. And so our attitude as parents goes a long way, because if they see us talking in Spanish outside the house to the grocer or the pharmacist or whatever, and that we are okay with that, and we're not feeling shameful because we don't speak the language that perfect, but we still go ahead and do it, they're going to follow our example. So I think, it starts at home, and it starts with the parents, and it starts with our attitude. And, we walk around with our head held high, with our language, our accent, our friends. And that's a good example for the children.
Thank you very much. And just before, you said you had already 3 manuscripts that you're working on for children's stories. Are these the follow-up on Junito's adventure, or yeah?
Two of them are. And one of them is almost finished. But 2 of them are. I wanted 2 more stories, or perhaps more, but for now I want 2 more stories on under Junito. And then the other one is it's a different character. It's also a boy. And I think there's a lot of girl characters out there. So I wanted to bring out more boy characters. And then, but the book that is coming out in 2024 is also a different character. She happens to be a girl because that's what the publisher wanted. And I honor that, excuse me. But it has to do with also with language. So it's going to be a great little story, and I'm excited about it. I can't wait for it to be announced. We haven't announced it yet. So now we're in the back and forth. As you know, when you write a manuscript, you send something, they send it back. You send something more, they send it back. So I've been actually waiting for the 3rd revision. So we'll see.
Okay. And so maybe it's a secret. So if it's a secret, you don't need to reveal it, but can you say what are the topics that are going to be dealt with in these stories?
The second book in the Junito series has to do with sports.
Okay.
And the 3rd one has to do with Junito has a way of, when he's afraid of something, he sings a little song to the tune of Happy Birthday to You. But he makes it, the same tune, but with whatever it is that he's feeling. So it's about feelings and how to overcome fear, if you will, in a fun way.
Okay. And so is the multilingual aspect as present as in the first book, or yeah?
Yes, the multilingual aspect is in the second book for sure. In the 3rd book is more about feelings, and but there's definitely going to be language involved. And I would like these books to be bilingual, so it'll be in both languages. And I just feel like there is a need for those books. I'm a big fan of bilingual books because, the text being bilingual, because there is a big population out there of monolingual parents that are now raising kids with Spanish. And I want them to be part of the story when they read out loud. I want the parents to understand what the story is about. So I always think it's fun that once a child can read, they can read to their parents the story in Spanish, and the parents can read it to them in English.
Yeah, then it's an exchange.
Yes.
Okay. And so we talked a lot about your children's books. I want to spend a little bit of time, maybe not too much because of time, but for you to talk to us about your 2 other books for adults. So there is one called Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, and the other one that you talked a bit about before is Raising Bilingual Children. Do you want to tell us quickly what they're about?
So Raising Bilingual Children is an ebook. It was published in 2014 by Simon & Schuster. It is a guide that includes interviews with language experts and with families that shared their experiences at that time. And it includes like 102 suggestions that are in a bubbly area
Okay.
way to raise bilingual kids. And Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie, Raising Bicultural Children, is also a guide for parents raising bicultural children in modern times. It includes chapters that explores what happens to us as adults that emigrate or move to another country, the stages of adjustment that we go through, and how to cope so we can help our kids adjust. There are interviews with psychologists and family therapists, and with families that were raising children with 2 or more cultures. I also included a chapter with young adults that shared their perspectives of having been raised bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's a lot of, I think, very useful for especially parents who are starting to think, okay, I want to raise my children with more than one language. So generally parents think about the language side, but there is so much around that we need to take care of. And so your books talk about this. So yeah, we're going to leave the links below in the description for everyone to have a look and to purchase. And maybe to finish, is there anything, any message, main message that you want to tell parents or teachers as well regarding raising multilingual children?
So, message to parents, regardless of where we live today, parents are raising multicultural children. Take advantage of that, embrace it, explore these cultures with your children, encourage language learning. We know too much about the benefits and advantages. I am convinced that my children are the adults they are today because they were raised with 3 cultures and 2 languages. Empathetic, kind, compassionate, respectful of others, accepting of others. And aren't these the values we want for our children? And for teachers, get to know your students before they go into your classroom. Know their cultures, what languages they speak, what are some of the customs and traditions. Work with the parents so that all the children feel welcome. They feel nurtured, they feel respected, they feel loved, not different or alone. There are big teachers communities out there, at least in the bilingual English-Spanish world, and I'm sure other languages that they can become involved, learn from one another. You are not alone.
Thank you very much. So just to finish, if people want to know more about like your podcast or your books or everything you do, where can they go and find you online?
On Instagram, they can find me Latina Boomer Mom. Actually on Threads as well. So on Threads, everything I post there is in Spanish, but in Latina Boomer Mom, it's a little bit in English and Spanish as well. And then Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn under my pen name, which is my full name, Maritere Rodriguez Bellas. And yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been wonderful to speak with you today, Yoshiro.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing all your experience.